Well, good morning. You're going to hear somebody talk today that's a little bit funny sounding in the voice because I have an American accent. I'm sorry, that's just the way it is. You know, everybody in this congregation used to be a kid, a child. I used to be little like you. And when I was your age, I had one thing in my mind that I wanted to do in life, and that was to fly airplanes. I didn't care about driving cars. I wanted to fly airplanes. And I thought about it, and I dreamed about it, and I talked about it. That's all I wanted to do. So when I was 16, I started taking lessons. I had to get rides to the airport because I couldn't drive, but I could fly. And one day my teacher said, "Tom, it's time to get away from this stuff right around here." I never went farther from the airport than I could see it. Who wanted to get lost, you know? Didn't want to get lost. He said, "You've got to go farther." So we planned a trip. I would fly from my home 40 miles north, 40 miles southwest, and 40 miles back home. It was a triangle with three sides, and I would do it in about an hour and 20 minutes. It would be a long way to walk. It wasn't very far to fly, but it was far enough so that I couldn't see home. That was the point. I could go far enough so that if I could get lost, I would get lost. And I didn't want to get lost. So we planned it very carefully, and we talked to the people who knew all about weather and all about wind and all about that kind of stuff. And they said, "Yes, there's going to be a snowstorm coming this afternoon, but if you leave now, you can be back before the snowstorm comes." So I took off all by myself, headed off to that first stop. And when I got there... What's that? What's a snowstorm?
It's snow falling down.
Yeah, snow falling down. Sometimes there's wind with it, and sometimes it's very, very... Anyway, I got to where I was going, landed, went on toward my next stop. But you know, people who forecast the weather do not always get it right. And the weather came in, and the snow started to fall, and I was in trouble. Because you see, it was against the law for me to fly in the clouds. For one thing, it's not safe, and for another thing, I wasn't trained to do that. So I had to go lower and lower and lower and lower just so I could see the ground. And I had to be able to see the ground to know where I was. Finally, I figured out I wasn't going to make that second stop, and I better head for home. I got out my map and figured out where I was on the map and turned toward home. But the snow kept coming. The snow kept coming. I said, maybe I can follow a road. But I looked down at the ground below me, and there were no roads. I looked back at the map, and I was over a very large lake. And, of course, you don't have roads that go through lakes. So I just kind of kept going, and I began to pray, and I said, "Lord, you know I'm out here. You know I have to get home. You know I really don't want to have an accident." And I got to the shore of the lake, and there was a railroad tracks. And I began to follow the railroad tracks, but the snow kept coming, and the snow kept coming, kept going lower and lower and lower. And by going lower, you know, the ground is so close, you can't really fly when you're on the ground. I didn't want to run into the ground. I didn't want to run into radio towers or power lines. So what was I going to do? The railroad tracks kept going, but they went up a hill. And into the hill ran the clouds. And I said, I'm either going to break the law and fly through the clouds, or I don't know what I'm going to do. But I prayed. And in that moment that I prayed, I felt a shadow come by. And I looked out my window to the left, and there, right there, was another airplane where he wasn't supposed to be. And I said to myself, I don't want to have an accident. I don't want to run into him, and I don't want him to run into me. I hope he sees me. And he began to waggle his wings a little bit. And I looked at it, and I read the number on the side of the airplane. Ah, that airplane is from my home airport. I wonder if I can stay with him. But he was much faster than I was. And I knew that I couldn't keep up with him. So I got on the radio, and I called his number, and no answer. But I didn't really want to give the idea that I was afraid. So when I called his number, "This is so-and-so. Can you please answer me?" No answer. changed the frequency on the radio, and this time I was really scared. And I said, "Dad, is that you?" And he came back and he said, "It sure is. Tuck in behind me and I'll lead you home." And I saw his nose come up, the propeller start to slow a little bit, and he went just the same speed I was. And I tucked in behind him, and about 7 minutes later, we broke out of the snowstorm into the sunshine, and the airport of home was right there. And I asked him, I said, "What were you doing out there in the snow? It was just as dangerous for you as it was for me." He said, "Well, I knew about how long it should take you, and when you didn't show up, I decided I should come looking for you. You are my son. I couldn't leave you out there all by yourself." You know, our world is in trouble. Our world is in big trouble.
If we get leave by ourselves, we will get lost.
Well, we might. But you know, Jesus is coming again. And he's going to make sure that when he comes, he will take you and me and all of us who believe in him home to be with him. Okay, you can go back to your seats now.